Hello, fellow makers and sewing fanatics. This is Ryan with Ryan's Cosplay Closet, also known as The Real Malky. Today we're going to be doing some basic sewing. We're going to join these two pieces of fabric together. Now, you will not need any special knowledge for this or any crazy stitching or anything like that. However, you will need your fabric, something to temporarily hold them together. In one case, I'm going to be using normal sewing pins. And I'm going to do another way with these Wonder Clips. These things are great, but I understand a lot of you may not have these, so we're going to start with pins. Now, normally when you're sewing, you want to pin the right sides of your fabric together. This fabric doesn't really have a right side or a wrong side, which is very helpful. So, you're going to line up your edges as best you can. I cut these kind of wonky, which is another thing. When you're cutting fabric, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just do the best you can. And if it's not perfect on the first try, don't get disappointed, because nobody gets it right on the first try. I have had a lot of practice doing this. Now, the fabrics are pinned together, and these have already been pre-washed and all that fun stuff, which is another very important yet not exactly exciting step in the sewing process. But if you don't pre-wash your fabric, when you sew it together and go to wash it, it'll shrink and the seam will pucker and it'll just look really weird and bad. So always pre-wash your fabric. Now, I'm going to be using my brother ST150 HDH. I am not going to go into how I threaded this thing, but I will put a link in the description to another threading video. Either mine or Tuck Custom. I don't know. We'll see. Now, another thing you want to do is take out your pins as you sew. Because even though it's extremely unlikely that your needle will hit a pin, it has happened to me. It is not a fun thing to fix, so just avoid that. Now, here we go. Make sure your machine is going as fast or slow as you are comfortable with, and sew the pieces of fabric together. And when you're sewing, when you start learning how to sew, you'll hear the words, your seam allowance, which is the distance from your your needle, to the edge of your fabric. I really don't pay that close attention to it. Well, not the actual number. I just kind of line the foot up on the edge of the fabric and go. But if you want to pay attention to that, go ahead. And when you get to about there, a back stitch. And forward stitch again to make sure the seam is locked in place. Bring up your needle. pull out your fabric and cut your thread. And I forgot to backstitch at the beginning of this. So we will go back and fix that. And if you do forget to backstitch like I just did, you can always go back and fix it. There we go. Now, normally I would use a green thread for this, something to match the fabric I'm working with, but I want you to be able to see what's actually going on, which is difficult to do. All right. And now we have a nice seam right here. But over here, we have this mess right here. And over time, these edges, they're going to get frayed, they're going to tear. It's going to cause all kinds of problems. So, to do that, well, another part of the process is ironing the seam flat. So, come with me. This is another part of the process that isn't exactly exciting, but it's necessary if you want a good, clean product. Yeah. Something else you'll hear a lot is trust the process. Which you should do, but I take that one step further. Try to enjoy the process, because most times if you're actually enjoying what you're doing, it's going to show through in the work. So back to ironing the seam. Just iron the seam flat, flip it over, iron that. So it's nice and flat, straight. Now, back to the sewing machine. Now, what we're going to do is switch out the foot on the sewing machine, because now I'm going to show you how I finish my edges. That's far, we don't want that. Now, when you are switching out the foot on your sewing machine, there's a little button lever thingy back here. Push that in, and the foot will fall off. Set that aside, and switch to your overcasting foot, or overlocking foot. Okay, now that our fabrics are sewn together, like so, we will need to finish this edge right here, because eventually if you don't do that, the edges will get all frayy and messed up and start to cause problems. So there are a couple ways you can do this. You can use a serger, which I don't have because those things are pretty expensive. You can use an overcasting stitch, which I'm going to demonstrate for you now. Or you can use a French seam, which I will demonstrate for you later. Now, I have already set the machine to the correct stitch, size, and option. This is going to be stitch number 7, which is this stitch right here. Now, when you are overlocking your edge, you want to have this little guide right here, because that will ensure that the thread goes here, and then the needle will shift over to here on this side of the guide, and then back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That will keep the edges locked together, like so. And you can go as fast or as slow as you're comfortable with. And just stitch all the way down to the other side, or the other end of your seam. And with this one, you don't actually have to backstitch, because, well, I don't really know why, but it just doesn't help. Just keep doing that until you are done. Like that. Pull up your needle, pull out your fabric, cut the thread, trim the thread, and now this edge is going to stay together much better, and if it does start to fray, it'll only fray to there and not go all the way through to there. And you can top stitch if you want, but I'm not going to do that this time. So that's what that looks like. Now, for the other way I do this, the French seam. This one requires a little bit more thought. For the French seam, you want to pin the wrong sides of your fabric together. Because what you do on the French seam is you sew your fabric, iron it, flip it inside out, and sew it again. Make sure you're using the correct stitch setting and the correct sewing foot. Bring the thing down, lock it into place, and there we go. Make sure your thread is out of the way. Remove the first wonder clip. Backstitch, and then forward stitch. I'm going to speed this up a bit. And again, make sure it is going as fast or as slow as you are comfortable with. And another thing, most beginner tailors or sewists or fabric manipulators, whatever we call ourselves, try to do is force the fabric to go through the machine faster than it wants to. So that causes issues, tangles things up. Don't do that. A couple more. Remember the back stitch, forward stitch, pull up the needle, cut the thread, trim the thread, and iron the seam. Now, normally I would split the fabrics up and iron them like this. But I'm not going to do that this time because we're going to need to trim the seam right there. And then, well, it's important that both of the fabric edges are together because we're going to stitch this again. And that'll make sense in just a few seconds. Oh, maybe a minute. Now we're going to trim the seam as close to your stitch line as possible without actually cutting into your stitch line. Or your fingers. Don't cut your fingers. That's just, well, seems like common sense, but apparently it's not. And now we are going to fold the fabrics over so that now, remember when we stitched it together like this, it was the wrong side facing. So now when we fold it over, the right sides will be facing. Make sure this seam is right there on the edges of the fabric. Now we're going to stitch it again. And again, remember the back stitch. And I'm going to speed this up a bit. back stitch again, forward stitch, lock the needle, cut the fabric, cut the thread, and now when we turn it right side out, you have the initial seam is all wrapped up inside this seam. And that way it doesn't fray or come apart or anything like that. And you can top stitch if you want. I'm not going to this time because I'm just not going to. So that is your basic sewing tutorial with a little troubleshooting thrown in there just because. So thanks for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you back here for more sewing or foam smithing shenanigans. Have a nice day.